Okay, looks like it has a button. No.
Yeah. Okay. So hi everybody. I'm Roy. I'm Artifactory product manager, and I'm here to discuss today a little bit about the past, present, and future of JFrog Artifactories. So the talk should be about 45 minutes, and I do want to spend some time in the end for questions and answers and have an open discussion. Just to emphasize, at any point in time, if you have any comments or something that you wanted to ask, feel free during the presentation itself. You don't need to wait until we reach the final part. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So let's start in the past. What I want to discuss in the past is the challenges that we used to have before we started to use the repository manager. It all started basically when developers started to behave a little bit differently. Long time ago, developers realized that by consuming external libraries, open source libraries, they'll be able to quickly add new capabilities to their projects. So instead of wasting a lot of time to develop everything from scratch over and over again, by simply consuming those dependencies, they will be able to quickly add all the capabilities they need to their project. With this change of behavior, a new set of challenges were introduced. So the first one was the sharing of dependencies between the different team members. So in case I want to implement a new dependency, I want to include it in my project, but of course, other team members will have to have it as well. So you need a centralized place to manage all of those dependencies to easily be shared between all the team members. Additionally, in the early ages, those dependencies used to be hosted on a different server, which was not very stable, and often the builds used to break just because the server itself was just inaccessible. So for that reason, you had to have a server that will proxy that remote server and cache your dependencies. And lastly, of course, it's all about permission management. So developers by accident would sometimes delete a dependency or remove it or any other thing, and you will not really have any way to really manage the access and permission of your different team members. So it took me a little bit of scrolling through the Facebook, but all of that was handled with the very first version of Artifactory, which was released in December 2006. It was 9 years ago. So this is actually version 1.2, 2007. This is how the UI used to look like. Very fancy, I know. But
It's not 1.0 because 1.0 didn't have any UI.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It was March 2007, 1.2. But please don't judge us. It would be like judging someone from his hairdo from the 80s. So this is how it used to look like.
Go back.
Okay.
I got the now. I didn't get things.
Okay, so let's get to the now, to the current challenges that people in the continuous integration continuous deployment domain are handling. So the first one is the fact that the open source community used to be all about Maven and normally a lot around Java. Today, that's not the case. Today, we are talking about all of the different technologies. Within the same organization, you will not be committed, you will not be no longer a Java shop or a .NET shop. You will choose the technology according to the task in hand. You will want to select the best technology that will enable you to address the problems that you want to resolve. With this new behavior comes a new set of challenges. It will mean that you will not be able to select different tools, or you will not like to have all different tools to support a different type of technologies. You will want a single universal repository that will know how to manage with all the different technologies that you need to handle within your organization. So that is one of the main challenges that are handled today, and we can see it in other repository management as well, mainly in Artifactory, that the integration that we support grow in every quarter, and we introduce new support for technologies like .NET and Bard and so on. Also, very important to notice that it's all about the ecosystem. No tool today stands by itself. Everything is about the integration. We need to have very good integration with the entire pipeline. So if we're talking about the continuous integration servers that are leading the market today, such as Jenkins and TeamCD and Bamboo and TFS and so on. The different build tools like Maven and Gradle and SPT and Ivy. And in JFrog, we have a dedicated team that all they do is maintain all of our open source project, which develops around our ecosystem, which is our plugins, and additional handling of pull requests from the community, and contributing to other community projects such as GitLFS and so on. And the main thing about developing those integrations is because we want to start to aggregate the relevant information from the very first step of creating the build. So this is also linking into the next slide, which is basically it's all about the metadata. The aggregation of the information starting from the very first second that you start and triggering your build, when you make your project, when you get the required dependencies, when you want to know the environment which you ran your build upon, and so on. So basically, together with the ecosystem, one of the nicest things that I heard this week from Jagan is Artifactory has a lot of different nicknames in different organizations. And one of the nicest one is actually a metadata hub, meaning the content or the information that you get from an artifact itself would be its name, its size, its age maybe, and its coordinates according to the path it's saved on, which gives you a very limited amount of information you can aggregate and attach to an artifact or a package. What Artifactory enables you basically is to, on top of that, attach any additional information that you want, which is crucial to understand the status of your package, the state it is in, if it's ready to be promoted to the next step, and of course gives you a lot of visible information to be queried later on. It can be deleted, cleaned up, and so on. While we understand the importance of the metadata, we created the whole query language that will support that ability, which is Artifactory query language. If you want to pause for a second, I guess most of you are, besides the fact that you're familiar with Artifactory, you get a chance to use it quite often. Any of you had a chance to play with AQL with Artifactory query language? Okay. So, in one of the latest releases, in order to promote AQL, in one of the latest releases of Artifactory, we introduced a specific package type search. So you can search it according to the package type that you want. So for Docker, Bower, NPM, and so on, each one has a dedicated package type. To promote that, we added a little AQL button next to the search, which allows you to actually see how we create the AQL search, that search according to the metadata and present you the information. The AQL is very useful for pretty much customizing your business logic in the automation of the pipeline from development, staging, deployment, distributions, and so on. So it's super useful for pretty much any use case that you want. It gives you, it's a Mongo-like syntax, which gives you the ability to set your queries and extract the information that you want and really understand the content in each one of your packages. So when you think about how do you construct your pipeline and how do you fully automate it, AQL is definitely something that you need to consider. The next challenge that we see today, and we hear from a lot of our customers, is taking things to a global scale. So if you're talking about teams sharing information but no one sitting in the same location, today, of course, it's no longer the case. You have teams scattered all over the world, and they are working on the same project, and the synchronization of the content and the metadata is crucial for that part of making the pipeline and the flow of the entire cycle move very, very fast. So Artifactory already supports the replication and the multi-push replication, which enables just that besides the content that you push to all of the locations that needs to consume it, you'll also be able to sync your properties. In version 4.1, we also introduced the smart remote repo, which when proxying another Artifactory instance gives you pretty much the same capabilities, but in a lazy way. So you don't need to sync the entire information, the entire binaries, and the entire metadata, just the stuff that you actually consume, but still get the ability to delete the detections, to sync the properties, and to get statistic report about how users are consuming those packages remotely as well. The second thing is, how do you really actually manage to maintain all of your Artifactory instances within the organization? So again, it's no longer a scale of having one or two Artifactory instances within your organization. We have a lot of customers that reach tens and almost 100 Artifactory instances within one organization. Of course, they're scattered all over the world. For the team managing those instances, you have to have a unified interface where you can firstly monitor the status of all of the instances, and of course have an easy-to-use means of pushing configuration. For that, we introduced JFrog Mission Control in September. It is still in beta phase, but you can already download it and start to play with it. It's accessible on in Vintray. And basically, the JFrog Mission Control is a layer on top of Artifactory, which enables you to discover all of the Artifactory instances within your organization and very easily manage templates. So you can, instead of repeating the same action over and over again, just create one template which suits your need for your local remotes and according to the different package type, and just push the configuration in all of the instances at once. And of course, it's very useful for security configuration, such as OAuth, LDAP, SAML, and so on. So basically, if you're the Artifactory admin within your organization, it's very, very important that you be aware of those capabilities and at least understand how you can take a lot of the load off of the day-to-day actions that you need to perform while maintaining Artifactory and in a global scale. And the most important catcher that we have now, and the most important thing that we see from our customers, is the need for speed. In today's world, there is zero tolerance to having a response like, okay, it will be available 6 months from now. We can fix this bug in 3 queues from now. Today, the need for new features, improvements, bug fixes, everything needs to be now. So by unifying and creating a very robust API, we are now very much emphasizing that each capability that we have will also be supported via a REST API. Also in the JFrog Mission Control and in Artifactory. And later on next year, we'll also create a new version of our API. So we'll also introduce a lot of improvements there. But basically what we want to allow you is through very advanced scripting and again using AQL and inserting the metadata where needed, give you a very easy way of automating the entire process. So enabling you to control the cycle, but having as DevOps or different team members within the organization, having the visibility to understand what happened, which package happened to be in which one of the stages, and of course being able to seamlessly push them forward throughout the entire process until they reach the maturity that they can be deployed or distributed through Vintray. So that was most of the stuff that we are already aware of the needs that we have now. I want to discuss with you now a little bit about the more interesting things that we can look forward in the future of Artifactory. So I tried to select the main 4 topics that I thought are more interesting for this kind of a discussion. And again, feel free if you have any questions or feedback, you can stop me and we can discuss it as we move along. So firstly, what we see is that the universe is expanding, and it's something that is it's very important to acknowledge. So it's not that we can feel comfortable with the set of integrations that we currently offer. We see that the market is currently reporting to us new needs and new integrations. So we can see it with the OPKG, which is very useful for embedded systems in the world of IoT, required from some of our customers. We have a big request for CocoaPods now with the open sourcing of Swift and people using Objective-C and so on for PHP. We have the support for PHP composers, and beside PHP composer and all of the other stuff that we plan to add, we also plan to continue and improving the existing integrations that we offer. So for example, Docker with the need for content signing and the support for Docker Notary. It's all about the metadata, so Docker labels as well. I'm not sure how many of you are Docker users or working with the containers, but they're also understanding the need to tag things with labels and metadata is very valuable to be able to use it for filters and so on. So it's also something that will be extracted and indexed and saved in Artifactory so later it can be queried. Our big efforts to also add to the GitLFS with the SSH authentications and so on, supporting more advanced use cases that we can see with NPM and Bower, like the ability for a dependency rewrite of the URLs so they can be tested Artifactory and so on. So this is definitely something that we plan to emphasize as we move along, and each quarter we'll be introducing new integrations and improvement of existing ones as well. So one of the more interesting topics that we see today is storage. Everybody talking today about scalable storage. They're talking about hundreds of terabytes and petabytes and so on. So today we already have some use cases of customers having well over a few hundreds of terabytes on the current infrastructure of their Artifactory instances in many different setups. And today we already support different setups and providers for your storage solution. So it can be a file system, it can be NFS, it can be object storage as S3 or Google Cloud Storage and so on. But we're starting to see a lot of use cases where it just isn't enough, and we want to support very complex setups. So one example that we can give, we have customers that say, okay, I want a chain of different providers. I want to be able to have filers which are SSD, which are very expensive but very fast. And for my archive repositories, I want something which is cheaper, and I don't really access that much, so the I/O connections are not really that important to me. So for that, I will want to have something like Glacier or S3 and so on. So we'll be able to configure. So what we plan to do is support firstly sharding, which enables you to configure a chain of the different storage providers. Not only that, it's also very important that your content will be redundant. So you'll be able to write the content at the same time to more than one location. So the combination of the sharding and the redundancy will enable you, for example, if you have a file that for some reason becomes inaccessible, gives you enough time to recover from that, reconnect it, and Artifactory will know to balance. And Artifactory will know how to balance back and make sure everything is in sync. Furthermore, you'll be able to configure a repository per specific filer. So for a group of your local repositories, which is very important, that they will be accessible and the I/O actions will be very, very rapid, you'll be able to configure them and allocate them to your SSD. While your archive repositories will be able to allocate and set to your S3 provider, for example. And you'll be able to set your quota per repository to make sure that you manage the quota not per instance, but per specific repository, which is, again, very useful use case in most of our customer needs today. And the last thing that you will also be able to set priority for read and write operation. So all of the features combined together are aimed to give customers that will reach very large scale of storage a full solution that they will be able to implement. And of course, those are kind of customers that are already heavy Artifactory users, but they will have the reassurance that their bytes, which is the most important thing in the entire cycle, in the end of the day, will be well saved and of course redundant and will be well managed. One of the more interesting topics and use cases that we hear today is around the concept of builds and versions. So a build used to be something that was really easy to explain. You build, you make your project, you get the required dependency, you package it all nice and tightly, and you upload it into Artifactory, and you start to go through the promotion cycle and the entire pipeline for the staging, testing, and so on. The concept of a build today is something which is very much different. Firstly, with the introduction of microservices, you don't really want to build your entire project every time over and over again. You want to make sure that you build just the stuff that you actually need and know how to reference the other microservices to make sure that the APIs are still working, you go for the integration test and so on. Also, the idea of how do you package your project is something that we see that there almost no two use cases are alike. You will start to implement your business logic from the very first phase of how do you build your package. We see use cases that I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago would be considered very odd. You would package an npm together with a jar inside a var, and that would go into a dev file, and that would be at the end running on your container. And at the end of the day, what you will want to distribute and go through the pipeline is a Docker image or a Amazon image and so on. Now it goes back to the metadata. Not only that you want to be able to have the flexibility to package whatever you want and allocate them together. And in the end of the day, what you have to distribute is something that you can actually deploy or distribute through Bitrate to your customers. You also want to aggregate all of the metadata that we discussed before, so you'll be able to very easily find what is the content of each one of those packages or inside a container, and vice versa. I want to know each one of the packages, where they're located, which one of the containers consumed those packages that I created. So we plan to expand the capabilities of what we have currently in our integrations and our built-in flow to support all of those different use cases, to have an hierarchy of the different models and components. So you'll be able to have full traceability about on which environment each one of the packages were built, and in the end of the day, what do you have, which content do you have in each one of your containers and each one of your images and so on. And again, because we're going to put a lot of emphasis on aggregating the information in each one of the steps, everything will be queryable, and you'll be able to use AQL to quickly record on or understand the full content of each one of the packages that you have inside your images and so on. Another thing that we started to do last year, and then we're going to continue to do this year, is to work heavily on the integration between the suite of products that we have in JFrog, which is Artifactory, Bitrate, and on top of that, Addition. So we see that normally in our organization, different teams manage different parts of the cycle. So you have the teams that are, of course, developing, and the ops, which manage the infrastructure and which content is deployed upon them and ran at every point in time. And you have Bitrate to manage your distribution phases, which is normally a different thing. Now, today we already have very good integration with the ability to push your content into Bitrate seamlessly. But what we plan to increase is also the ease in configuration, to be able to share security configuration, permission configuration between the different tools, getting the information back from Bitrate into Artifactory in regards to the statistics and logs, understanding how users are consuming our product, which one of the distribution is more popular, introducing concepts such as product, which is something that is very missing today from the distribution world. Because normally when you distribute something, you might distribute it both as an RPM, as a Debian, as a zip file, as a Docker container, and so on. But basically what you're actually distributing is a full product. And this is something that we plan to work on very early on in 2016. So users might want to interact with Bitrate or feel more happy interacting with Artifactory. But under the scene, under the hood, all of the information will flow, including the metadata again, of course, but from Artifactory into Bitrate, and all the relevant information that is aggregated in Bitrate will be also feedback into Artifactory. So it doesn't matter in which team you're allocated or you feel more comfortable or have more need to use Bitrate or Artifactory, the entire pipeline will be managed from your end completely seamlessly. The last thing is I want to invite you all to our Swamp Up, the JFrog User Conference that will be again this year in Napa Valley. Not sure if you had a chance to be there last year. It was great. So that was a little bit about what we have to share, about the stuff that you can expect, the stuff that we are doing now. And if you have any comments or questions, I will be more than happy.
CFP is open.
Yeah.
For Swamp Up.
Call for papers.
That's it. Any questions? Some scenarios that you care to share?
I'm sorry, did you say there was a call for papers for that? I missed that.
It is open now.
Oh,
Just go to smartalgebra.com, propose a talk.
Oh, okay, great.
Roy, with regard to the, but maybe a question first. How many of you guys already have the experience to use Artifactory 4.0? And the latest features, so like the Git LFS integration, the Docker. How many of you guys are use Git LFS? And Artifactory as a Docker registry? Yeah. Oh. So, well, probably some of what you described that we are planning to do in the future requires some of the feedback here from the users, maybe. If you want to.
Actually, one question, who uses more than 2 or 3 integrations in Artifactory?
Like packages, you mean?
Yeah, different technologies. And we had one Docker just now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far, just Docker. Different teams are using different technologies.
I'm here, the people who are doing multiple technologies, I'm wondering if you could tell me which technologies you're using and how they work together.
Well, we have a single Artifactory instance, and we brought it in originally for our sort of IT integration for Debian and RPM package to go and integrate with Puppet and distribution, things like that. Then we brought up a large project that is using Debian packages for the product development itself. We come from an environment that comes from a monolithic software development practice.